If you are watching this, then congratulations! To me, because this doesn't seem like the easiest video to make, nor does it seem like the easiest video series to make. Now, this ain't gonna be some podcast, this is gonna be a series of edited videos talking about every single episode of official Nicktoons by the order of their air date. Which was very, very hard to put into order. But, I've done it, and all that pointless time I've spent making a list of that order needed a point. So here we are. I want to devote my time talking about Nicktoons. Because I love cartoons and animation, and though Cartoon Network also has a strong presence over my day-to-day life with referential humor...
Say, 19th century kid, you want to watch a cartoon on the television?
I've decided to take my interests into Nicktoons. Why? Because I guess because they're more easily accessible with a subscription to Paramount Plus. That's right, just one subscription to Paramount Plus could give you access to all shows mentioned in this video, including Doug, Ren and Stimpy, Rugrats. Anyhow, I hope to at least go through this with YouTube content for at least, I don't know, maybe 3 episodes in 1 year. Because Lord knows I suck at keeping a consistent upload time.
You think this is funny?
In a cosmic sort of way.
Well,
Sea pink.
is this how you get your sick kicks?
In a cosmic sort of way.
Oh my goodness! Squidward!
So I want to just fuel the motivation I have and try my best to actually talk about these shows and such. Now, with every first premiere of a show, or as worthy of being mentioned, I will talk about the premise and creation of a show. Unfortunately for me, my first 3 Nicktoons all premiere on the same date, so I gotta introduce all 3 with a satisfying background. Well, satisfying to my tastes. You guys can just skip over Doug if you don't really care about that show. I know, like, all my friends probably have never watched Doug. I will give you $1 if you know what happens in the episode Doug's Big News before having watched this. Okay, enough with the Doug apathy. How about I give insight into that show instead of ragging on its passed-over nature? The creator of the show, Jim Jenkins, has stated this show is mostly an autobiographical depiction of his adolescence. Just in place of Jim, we have Doug, voiced by Billy West. Doug writes in his notebook and goes to school and has a best friend and a crush and a bully and a dog and a sister. The most interesting aspect about Doug would either be the multicolored characters or scatting background music. Yeah, I think that background satisfied me. So how about we jump into the first premiered episodes of Doug?
The dancing brothers' shoes broke and they stopped dancing immediately.
So this was my first time watching Doug, if you couldn't tell by how much I've talked about not knowing anybody that has. It just seems so not talked about within my friend circles. And frankly, the show ain't as boring as I was led to believe. Now, I still wouldn't say I have a better impression of this show than what I've already seen of Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy, but it's still entertaining enough for my attention span. In this first episode of Doug, or first premiered episode of Doug, it starts with Mr. Dink, the first ever Nicktoon character to be seen on the Nickelodeon channel. But more on topic, Doug is writing into his notebook about the day he's had, which has the whole plot of the episode narrated in past tense by Doug. So as the title suggests, the episode is about dancing, specifically the big dance. Specifically how Doug thinks he can't dance to impress Patty Mayonnaise at the big dance. And he's dressed up like a slug too. And the bully comes over to his house, who is also voiced by Billy West, and is the catalyst for Doug's fears. It's not the most complex plot, or... well, that's about what I have to say about Doug. Not the most complex. Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy, well, mostly Ren and Stimpy, push the boundaries and such with cartoons. But Doug, it's about as standard as you can get for Nicktoon. Still, not a bad show. Mr. Dink brings a lot of humor in with his goofy personality and his annoyed wife. Here Mr. Drink dresses as a chicken and hits several golf balls at the Funny's house. Oh, and there's also Skeeter. He makes weird sound effects and goes like some kind of goofy Urkel knockoff. The part where Skeeter shows Doug how to dance, twist his entire body up, that was pretty funny. And he just walks off on his fingers. Yeah, pretty funny indeed. This show has some fluid animation too, which is expected for a 90s cartoon that predates the era of digital animation. The little daydream about Doug being Hammerman. Yeah, Doug being MC Hammer. Speaking of Hammermen, Roger and all his buddies dressed up in hardware supplies as costumes for a big dance. Do all elementary school dances require the most ridiculous costumes? I mean, a slug was already ridiculous. At least the chicken is moderately silly, but it ain't so plain. It's weird. Heck, Roger himself says it's Hammer time, so they make 2 MC Hammer references in the span of a minute. Now to take a moment to avert your eyes into the background characters, you can see 1. A character dressed as Quail Man, Doug's original superhero persona. For some odd reason, Doug's original character is being used as someone else's costume. How does this fit into the Doug lore? I don't know. All I know about Quail Man is from merchandise and Nick All-Star Brawl speculation, so I'm a total noob on the Doug mythos. And 2. A girl's dressed as a donut, with a hole in the middle. How did she do that? After tripping over while dressed like a giant hammer and landing on Doug's foot, Roger and the other dancers laugh at Doug for being in pain, and, you know, not the guy dressed as a giant hammer that tripped over. Thankfully for Doug, Patty is a real one and starts doing that same painful foot maneuver and makes it a dance move. And even the music sounds a bit like You Can't Touch This by MC Hammer! Ah! I'm not actually mad, that's just acting. So then we end with the present time of Doug writing in his notebook, and Porkchop hurting Doug's injured foot again with zoom out to tons of golf balls on his lawn. Because of Mr. Dink doing this for unexplained reasons. Look, I don't know. Should I give these things a rating? I don't know, ratings are arbitrary, but since I just talked about an entire episode of Doug, I might as well. I don't know, it was alright, not amazing. 7 out of 10.
The fuck was that?
So nearly every cartoon back before our modern episodic times would be released with a sister episode. Nearly every time I'll have to talk about one episode, I'll have to talk about a sister episode right after it. Paired with Doug Can't Dance, we have Doug Gets Busted. And we start right out with Doug running from the feds, dressed in a prisoner uniform. If it weren't a greatly exaggerated imagination sequence, you'd think this show took a complete 180 and suddenly had an extremely intense action sequence or something. But it was a greatly exaggerated imagination sequence, like I said. So here Doug recalls the science fair. There was a singing fly trap, which as we all know ends perfectly well with a nice mayor's sequence, so nothing to worry about there. And Skeeter was the solar system.
The big yellow one's the sun! The yellow one is the sun!
And Doug had a volcano.
This is a volcano!
You think this is funny?
And then the assistant principal, Mr. Bone, puts out the volcano. Oh, and did I forget to mention Roger had a firecracker and he ignited it, and somehow people just gossip talked about him being a huge meltdown in the science lab. Roger doesn't want the blame, so he makes Doug think the volcano did it. Basically, this episode is Doug just thinking he had to run from the cops for burning down a science lab, which never happened. But the important thing is, we get to see my favorite character so far. No, it wasn't Mr. Dink. My favoritism belongs to Judy Funny. You see, she's a dramatic actress wannabe. She just acts so stuck up and in the moment, like she's always performing. I love it. She wins the award for Best Doug Character. So she helps Doug dress up as a bandit, and Doug just becomes Jack Bandit. He gets really deep into this persona, even dreaming about being this character. And I guess he runs away, I guess, into the forest. Porkchop. I don't know, he never gets busted. When does he get busted? As much as some of these things are silly, nothing's really grabbing me as funny. Ironically, since the main character is named Doug Funny. Oh, I guess he does get busted? More so as we know he didn't do anything, Mr. Bone just takes him to principal and gives him a second place prize for the science fair.
Doug, what are you talking about?
I don't know, not enough busting, 6 out of 10, just less entertaining than the first episode. Not bad or anything, just meh.